Yeah, I'm going to go through some of the tools that is in the Mergetool, but what is it? First of all, it's development tool designed purely for NAV. It do nothing else than that. It's an application written 100% inside Seaside also. It's open source. Every partner can basically use this tool for free. It's like developers toolkit is free. This one is actually free also for partners to use. It can also exist inside a customer database. It's actually only new objects, and as you see when I go through it today, I start from scratch and basically building my whole system going from there. There is an option for customers also to buy this tool if they need to. A little part about the history of the tool. It originally started in 1995 or maybe 94 actually, in the character-based version of NAV, and it could compare source code and things like that one. It was kind of a competition against my boss at that time to see who could be the best compare tool. In the graphical version, it was then ported to that one, and it was released in 96 or 97 as a partner tool for the whole NAV channel. I kept on maintaining it after I left Navision, and it ended up having 132 versions of it in the old object range that was scattered left and right in the whole application. And it has now been moved to a totally new range that is all new objects and have unique names, and it can basically exist with any other code in the system. So some of the tools that are in here is a compare tool. It can do log of source codes, both as NAV source code. It works on top of the text files. So one of the essentials for anyone to use it is to have application builder to be able to export in text. But it also compare XML file, HTML files, any kinds of files. It also, the XML files for the transformation tool, for example, is one of the things it also works on top of. It has a source code analyzer. There's an object explorer in there. It can merge NAV code. It can write and build online help for NAV with no extra tools. It can create caption and text constants, and it can do translation, and for form transformation there's some additional tools and a lot more actually. I'll show you, except for the last one, the NAV 2009 transformation, I should be able to show you everything today actually. So first I want to show you the Object Explorer. It's basically just a combination of the object table and then license permission and a few other tables in the system. But let me switch here to a customized database in here. This one is a 2009 R2 database, and I have a customer card here. I can see there's something about commission group in here, and I have a lookup to a table and all kinds of things like that one. I want to see what this one actually is, and I can go here also filter on a bunch of objects and see, a lot of it is modified, but not much to find out about that one. So the first thing to do is actually to import the Mergetool objects, and I just deleted my subfile here. So I have to go through this one a few times. And this one is the most current version. It's unreleased until per Saturday, and then I'll import this one in here. And it was just new objects, and I go refresh my menu suite out here. I'll have a new menu item up here, Mergetool, and in here I have all kinds of tools. So the first thing I want to do is look at the Object Explorer. And it basically takes all the objects in the database, load them into a temporary table with a lot of other information. So out here, for example, I have all my permissions, if I have read, insert, modify, and so on my objects. So if I have limited permissions or have an add-on that is protected or things like that one, I can actually filter on having me export permissions in here. But let me go here and say I want to put in a file name. And I probably know. Interesting, I didn't have to do it. I'll just put in that this one is actually my changes. And then I will export it in text, and then I can go down here and say export licensed all filtered object. But for the speed here, I'll actually go filter on only the one that I modified, because that's how I left my data in here. So I'll go here and export all filtered objects. And there's 83 of them, and it's exporting the objects. This one is actually using a new function that is in 2009 Service Pack 1, where you can call the export from the source code or from Seaside. So I exported all my objects, and let me go import a version. And as I open up version here, it gives me an error that I haven't set it up yet. So let's go do that. It inserts some languages and things like that one, but basically comes up with a default setup in here. You can have a default one for each user. And as you will see, there's a few screens in the system that actually resizes based on your actual computer screen. You need to put this one as high as possible, and I'll leave it at this one for right now for the demo here. There's a couple of other things in here, but normally you wouldn't have to change anything. But I'll actually go here and change one setting, that it actually will not automatically merge new fields in here. It's a new feature I want to show off, by the way. So I set up the merge, and I can now go here and say I want to bring in a new version. And I'll go down here and say that's my import an object text file. And I could filter on only one of them. But let's say I'm actually calling this version a customer. And I will look at my changed objects I just exported here. And then I can give it a description. And I normally would have to put something else in here, but for now I just want to click OK and import the objects. So what I just did, I went through the fact of actually importing objects. It's a source code from NAV, and there's some information that based on the revision is important in here. But basically it created a version underneath a list of objects, and underneath each object the lines of code actually in here. So let's go in and look at what it actually did in here. I imported 44,000 lines of code in here, and if I go look at my objects, it broke it up into individual objects. And if I go look at an object, I can look at the source code in here. And this one looks pretty much like just importing the text file. But one of the things that actually makes it work much better than a textual compare tool is actually if I zoom on this line down here. As you see, there is, of course, the text that is imported in multiple text strings because that's the only way to save it in the database. It also supports unlimited lengths of strings, so you can actually save additional values in a secondary table. But down here is really where the key is. It knows that this one actually refers to field number 1. And if I went up here and looked at another line, you'll see that this line actually is also marked as the first line and so on. And so when you're actually comparing text in the merge tool, it's actually doing a lot more than comparing the text. It's also comparing the context that you're actually in at that time. So that's one of the keys for the compare being better than any other text editor. Well, let's look at another thing after importing in here, because the next thing I want to see is actually a source code analyzer. And I saw I had that table about the commission group code or something like that in there. I want to see where that is actually used, and the source code analyzer will actually give you that information. So I'll go down here and say, let's do some source code analysis. And it now reads through the source code, and there's probably some of it where I can't find it correctly, but it's inserted 1,500 relations and 1,800 variables in here was actually found in that one. And I can go down and look at my objects. And if I look at my commission group down here, that is my new table, I can see that it actually has 4 relations in here. And this one, it knows that, hey, it uses this form as lookup form ID. It uses drill down form ID in here. And I can also see when I look here saying it's actually used in relations. And what is that then? This one is actually, it's used in the menu suite 2 different places, but it's also used in this table as a lookup form ID. Oops, I have to go here, of course, 11 places. In these places are actually where I use my commission group table, and I use it as a table relation from this field and so on. This source code analyzer is an object level. It don't, I'm seeing a field here right now, but it basically tells you everything about an object. And the information that it finds in here is, this one is a list of some of them, source table, data items. It finds basically everything in here. The other thing you can do, I'm now looking at my table customer in here. I can see down there's actually 65 variables in here. And it finds local variables, global variables, value, parameters, and return values. So everything is actually in here, so at that one also. And you can, of course, go search for all kinds of ways of looking at this one. Behind the scene is the actual field, so it's not just a text field you're actually searching in, as it's just displaying it in here. So, But that's a source code analyzer. And the other thing it also built what is called a clean source code. So I went in here and I looked at my objects, and I really want to see that relation in here in my table customer. I want to see the source code in there. And I can go here and look at my object lines. And this one now brings up, first of all, the long text, and that's all the source code. But then it also brings up what is a clean source code out here. So this one is actually the real code, not the definition of properties and other things. And I can see for these ones, I have relations marked here. So in this line, it's a new field with a table relation to commission group. I can, of course, drill down and say, hey, that's a relation that is this one in here. So you can keep on drill down, and just find any information you want, actually, so with the source code analyzer. And as you saw, I have a lot of statistical count in the bottom of each screen. The same actually exists in the Object Explorer. So when you have generated all this one, you can look at your actual objects and then go see the same information. But let's look at one of the standard features that were in there, because right now I imported customized objects. To compare something, I need a second version in here. So let me go here and go back to my list of versions. I need to import my 2009 R2 in here. So I actually go import another version. And this one would be W9. Oops. And I already prepared this one. I've prepared a little more than, I actually reduced it. So instead of the 113 kilobyte that takes around 5 minutes or so to import, I reduced it down to only 9 megabyte in here. So it actually runs a lot faster. So else I will have to tell too many jokes up here. This one basically is a Navision version. And this one based on Navision version and Navision version is actually a key for how the merging works for the objects version list. So, but else it's really not that important. So I'm importing this version, and I think it's probably like 500 objects or something in that one. So one thing to make the Mergetool really perform is I'm running right now on a solid state disk, and that gives a lot of it. But having a huge both object cache and database cache and running on a native database actually makes it run extremely fast in here. So I imported my new, and that was 510 objects and 171,000 lines of code. So I can now go ahead and compare my customer's version in here. So I'll go in here and say I want to compare the code or the objects. And I want to pick my old version in here. And I'll pick this W1 in here. And I'll then click OK. So if I just switch back to the slides here for a second, a compare is basically two versions, and I built what is called a contrast. That's a main record for the difference between them, and then I have contrast lines underneath that actually is a log of the changes. And there's a few more things, and I'll show it a little later, how you actually can find only changes to the version list and date, for example. But I have my customer down here, and I can see I now have 83 contrasts. And if I look at contrast, that's a table underneath. It's related to this one and the table I compared it against. And I can look at it, and I know it's colors, and colors are not allowed, but it's kind of nice to see in here. So this one is probably the only place almost that you see colors. But red just means it's a changed object. Purple means new in here. And I have this object being changed 1.23% in here. And let's go look at my customer table, because I already looked at that one. It's 1% changed. What is actually the changes in here? And I can go look at my lines, and it shows me the line of changes in here. And then next change, and I'll just use the hotkey, by the way, Control-N. And I can see I had the modifier flag, and I added something about commission. Then I come down here, and I can see I inserted a whole bunch of fields, and then I didn't do any more, actually. So this one was 1% change in the objects, as I say out here. But something that say a lot more about what the changes are is actually the number of group changes out here. So I can see in here I have totally 3 groups being changed. 2 of them are in the object properties, and that's the date and time and version list and things like that one. For merging purposes, the tool actually deals with all these changes automatically. You don't even have to do anything. So the really only change I have is one single group out here. So yeah, maybe you have a high percentage of change on an object, and I don't know if we have one down here saying one that is 2%, but there's only one group, and that's way more than about how tough it actually is to merge compared to the number of lines or the percentage of change actually in here. And again, inserted group is extremely easy to deal with. Change groups is where it gets a little more tricky. And you'll see I have some change groups in different tables, and that's like customer cards, for example. And if I just go here and say, okay, I want to look at my lines, I actually have a different kind of log in here. And this one is actually 2 forms. And if you remember that screen size thing I looked at, this form actually resizes to take the use of your complete screen actually in here. And then I can go in here, I have these ones that I can actually scroll both windows, but again I can hit Control-N, and it actually jumps through the changes, compare them next to each other in here. But it's nice to see them inside the editor. I can also get them to a text log, because maybe it's a lot easier to overview, and I can export a compare log, and I can say old, new, and that's fine. And it defaults here to a file name, just adding log at the end. And let's just do the standard format to begin with in here. So I now exported a log of the changes. And I have my changes log up here. And it basically now cut out a bunch of things in here. But I still have a lot of object properties, and then down here I have some new fields. That's actually, I have 2 lines of code before and 2 lines of code after. And then basically some inserts and things like that one. And it just keeps on going down here. Let's make a little change in how I export it here. Go export the log again. And say, for me, I want only to view a technical things, so I don't care about date, time, version list, so only export those ones. And now, let me just replace that file, and then my editor will pick it up again here. And now I'm actually only seeing the functional changes in here. There's also different log formats. So you can go in here and say, what format do you want? So you can actually do, right now it has before, old, after, and then before, new, after. You could also do a before, old, and then new, and then after. It's a little shorter, because you have fewer similar lines. You can also do something about headers, only showing percentages, and all kinds of things like that one in here. So that's really what you can do with the compare of different versions in here. And the groups is really the whole key to the system. And I know people have built functionality on top of this one that actually is saying, if this table is changed between this version and this version, it costs so much to upgrade. If this table is changed between those 2 versions, it's almost a 0 impact. But if it's a jobs table, it's a huge impact and things like that one. So you can almost build an estimating engine for upgrades by actually looking at numbers like that one. It of course requires a huge amount of knowledge and using the tools already. So let's look at some merging in here, because right now I have looked at comparing one version. But the real key here is actually to be able to combine code together. And I have now a customer version, and I have something it was based on. I've already created another solution in here, and if I look at it in here, it's called EDI. It's an extremely simple EDI solution. It's basically have a couple of fields of when it was imported, a document number, and a single report that just do everything. So it's just an example of an application, but it's one that hits sales orders, sales invoice, posted documents, all kinds of things, like my customizations also hit already actually. So let's switch back here. And the first thing to do when merging is always think about how can you reduce the number of objects. So right now I imported my customer's version in here. And all of them had the modifier flag on. But one of the common things is like you look at the object and you look at all kinds of things and then you hit escape. And it comes up and asks you if you want to save the object. And a lot of times you just hit enter and don't think about it. Other times you really didn't know if you did anything. So sometimes you actually save objects that actually were not changed in here. So let me go and re-import that customer again. So I actually just go in here and look up to my customer version. It puts all my information in here for me. And this one is just number 2. And then I will go down here and say this one is actually based on my Navision version. And this one is important for merging, and I'll show you a little later, because it builds something that is called an added version list. It takes what comes from Microsoft for the object and cut it off, and then it keeps that little piece and saying this one is actually what has been added. So when you put two different solutions together, you can actually take these added pieces and add them behind the Microsoft version list that actually came on it. The same works for ISV product, it works for everything, but it's important that you pick the base version in here. Another thing I want to do is actually, because these compares normally runs over a long time, I can actually go in and say I want to compare it against this version, and I want to delete all objects that are equal immediately and so on. So this one is a way of cutting your number of objects. It's basically just kind of like a batch process because it's just running a couple of tasks after each other. You could even export a log in this one also. So if I looked at my time on doing this one, I exported the objects, and then I have to wait 5 minutes. And now I'll come back to a tool, I'm importing it, and that's basically it. So, and it took me 30 seconds. So I maybe spent 2 minutes of my actual time, but the tool have been working for hours, maybe, or not hours, but several minutes to actually do this one. It told me that I had 0 objects that I was deleted in here. And it tells me all the time. So now I have my customer 2, and I can go down here and use a function and say find object property changes. So if I look at that one, I can go in and say I want to find object property changes, meaning date, time, version list. And I can go ahead and delete objects, but let me just for now say that I don't want it. It actually found 9 objects in here that only had version list changes. So, and if I wanted to, I could of course go look at my contrast, and I'll see this one in here, my item table, and somehow it only had object property changes, and a couple of other chart of account, item card, and things like that one. Either there was a change and it was reversed, or somebody just saved it by accident. So let me go run it again here, and simply find those changes and get rid of those objects, because I don't need to merge these ones going forward, because there's really no changes in them. So now I deleted 9 objects. So this one I've cleaned out. If I look at my version here, my customer's code is now cleaned. I compared it against my W1 version. That is actually what I'm using as my common source in the 3 versions. Now I need to get the EDI product in there, and that's basically my new version down here, and that's the imported version also. And then I need to find my output down here at the end. So I go here, and again, oops, I should use the mouse so you can see what I'm doing here. I will import another object text file, and this one would be the EDI, and it's 1.02. And I will now go find my text file. I already exported this one before. I would normally go export this one myself also, but I did all this one already. So I have a description, and it's based on that version. And I don't need to compare, but let's say this one is a huge solution, and the only thing this customer have actually modified is these few objects. If I imported everything, I would first of all have to wait for it, but I would also then have to import these objects from text maybe. And if there were OCXs, automation, you have issues compiling them. So really, I only want to import objects in my EDI solution that exist in my customer solution up here. So again, it's all about cutting. First taking, you have all the whole database, 6,000 objects. There was 83 modified. There was 9 of them that were actually not modified. There was 74. And now I'm only importing from the EDI solution, the one that actually is included in the 74 I have in my customer solution. And rest of them are going to deal with in an FOB format, because that's where you can deal with the objects itself then. So yeah, and I'll just click OK here, and it's importing my EDI. And I can look at some of the objects in here, and I'll see that it's customer sales header, shipment header, a lot of conflicts with my existing objects, both form and pages down here. And I also have a menu suite actually down here, and menu suites number 8, and there's only 10 for the whole world to use. So I will actually have a conflict with what this customer already have in his database. So I'll show you how to solve that one. But now I have everything I need in here, so I will start on my customer, and then I will actually go and merge versions in here. And again, you can do few objects. Now, the same versions that I refer to here in the PowerPoint, remember this picture in your head all the time, 4 versions. Common source, customized version, new version. You're putting this together and building the output down there. So the first thing is pick my W1 version, pick my EDI version, And then my output down here, I have an assist edit, so I could select one if I wanted to, but I would just do this one. This one would just be a customer merged. I normally do this one and then just add a -m after it. I can give it a comment. And then if I have issues with this one, what would you select as default? And I would just leave out that one alone. And then I would go down here and say, I want to skip if I have manual merges showing up. Because what it's actually trying to do now, it's trying to put changes going to two different directions together in one single version now. The trick in this merge is actually that you create a contrast between the old and the custom version. You create a contrast between the old and the new version. And now you basically have two lists of contrasts. The old line number is actually in both of them. So that's actually how you can, with the key, follow them down actually as it goes. If there's a change added in one version that actually don't has any changes in the same area, that new version will actually slide out automatically. You can have the same in the other one. It adds that code automatically. Only if you have line that either touch each other or is actually the exact two or is the same lines being changed, you actually have to do something manually. So what I would do here first is saying skip if I have manual merges. And it now goes through and it do all the steps in here and actually builds it. And first of all, I get an error condition. You have an issue here. Somebody created an object and somebody else created an object in two solutions. It should really not be able to occur, but it's one of those things that occur a lot with menu suites in here. So what I can do actually, I have prepared a little here, and I will show you how to deal with that one, but I'll just leave that one for the absolute end in here. And then you can see I have a customer version created, and 19 objects actually require manual merges. But it already went ahead and actually did 4 of them in here. And by the way, this example is made to make conflicts, but I can see some of the objects that it already dealt with in here, like posted sales shipments and things like that one. Let me go check one field that I unchecked in the beginning actually in here. If you remember this one, automatically merge new lines. It's one of the things in the merge tool. The merge tool have never tried to be intelligent about actually putting changes together. There's a lot of hotkeys that allows it to be real fast to do it manually, but it will always show you all changes. But because of the knowing the actual source code, what it's related to, if you have code that relates to new fields and is not the same number, it will actually put this code together now. And it's a brand new feature. It hasn't even been released yet. But then I can go in here and say I want to merge the version again. And I will just go down here and say, yep, click OK. And now it's going through. And of course I get my error condition. Now I only have 13 objects left to do actually. And this one is, it now put all the fields together for me automatically and so on. If I wanted to see what the changes were, I could of course go down here and look, and now I have contrast, I have my customer table. And if I go down here, I can see I inserted code for as field EDI customer number, and then I had my shipment description and commission thing and things like that one already have in here. So it put all that code together for me already. Now the last piece is actually to do the manual portion. If I wanted to know what I was missing in here, there's several functions in here. I can go in and go to compare previous version, and I can go in and say, for this one, my previous version was my customer 2. I want to see my missing objects. And this one basically is a list of what I haven't done yet. So I have a problem with my table salesperson. Yeah, and these tables have not been merged yet. So let's bring up the merge again. Uncheck this field. And now it actually will pop up a lot of questions. Before I do that one, I have to disable my navigation pane, because with my low screen resolution here, I don't have any room for showing my screen as it actually pops up here. So let's merge it. And I left everything as it was, and then click OK. This one is how it actually deals with merges. This one is a list of changes. I had, in my old version, I had a line before and a line after. No changes. Remember the 4 versions I picked to begin with? That's exactly what you're seeing on the screen here. Old, custom, new, and output down here. So I can see in my code out here, I actually inserted some code to copy some fields from one table to another. And down here, I actually did the same with the EDI solution. The key to this system is that anything that has a new line number, and you can see these lines have 20, 30, 40, 50, actually shows up in this window. So if I wanted to say all this code needs to go before, or it has to go after, let's say I put it in as line 70. So if I actually do 70, this one is multiple subforms, by the way, so it won't update until I actually do a function in here. But you can see now I put my code together, and it's not copy-paste, it's not drag and drop, but this one is actually one way of doing it. You would never do it this way manually. But this one basically just shows you how you actually can determine, even if I wanted to switch the order of these lines, I can put this one in as 65, and it actually now will show that line up there, for example. Again, you would never do it this way. There's functions for everything in here. So let's put the code back as it was, and I'll put in like, instead of having my code from over here selected, I can say it's easier to find a place for this code inside this code over here. And then I can go and say, these lines of code over here, I actually want to use a function on my new lines, again referring to the 3 original windows, select a line number. It now brings up my current output, and I can pick a line where it comes after, and as I pick that one, it goes in here. There's even more functions, and you'll see it as I move on, how it actually can do even more functions in here like that one. There's all kinds of things about toggling the selection. There's also, let's put the code back as it was. And then I can actually go say, and this one, I only have new lines. I had no, see this one is to compare the object status against, oh, I have my menu open, that's why it's not hovering up here. It's my old to new line status, meaning it's basically my compare status down here. This one is my compare status for the other one. And I actually have a function in here that is real neat. All the one that I inserted code, put it first, and then I just click OK down here. And you're basically done with it. And then it moves on. And now it actually already adds all my forms in here. I already finished all the tables. I had one single thing to do because I have a change to my sales header that actually hit the exact same lines of code in the system. In here I have a page name ML, and I have foreign trade as the last one. If I look at it over here, I have commission. If I look at it down here, I have EDI. It's basically having fields added or pages. One of the things, if you're not familiar with the text format, let me look in the, oh, I can't because I'm running, I can't bring up the customer table in here or the customer card, but it's basically the tabs on your form. So I can go in here and say, yeah, I want that commission up here. I want to take that one, and I want to go down here and change this line of code down here and add it manually. So I'm allowed to edit the code also in here. I could even insert my lines also, as I will do that one in a little later example in here. So I click OK. And if I look at it right now, I'm actually created myself a problem in here. Because I had EDI, I had my commission, and my fields is actually going to show up in the same tab now. And I'll see how that actually works as I get later on here. So, and this one is just, I have new controls, and I have new controls. And let me just use one of these functions and say, whatever was inserted, I want to insert that first down here on the custom lines. And I can see this one is in page number 6, and this one over here is also in page number 6. And you'll see later on, there's an easy way of finding these kind of bugs in here. And that was my customer card. Now I've moved on to my sales order. And it's not because there's just one change in there. There's actually multiple changes that I added to these forms in here. Instead of doing the manual editing, I can use a function down here and actually say merge my page name ML. And now it tells me, hey, it added one page to my custom objects. So I just have to remember this one. And it turned the line green, by the way, down here because it's a manual edit. And I can see it have the EDI and then the commission. And then it comes up and say, weird, there was no fields. And this one is intentionally because I actually manually moved the code to a different place in the source file. So it actually don't come up with a conflict. Normally you would have seen a conflict. but merge the page name. Again, one page added. And hit OK. And this one again, new functions. And I will do the one from custom. I will insert them first. And then I will use a special function down here, because I could go ahead and change this in-page number. But I actually have a function in here to change what comes from my custom version, the in-page number. And I want to add 1 to that one, meaning I'm moving the fields 1 tab further out. And as you saw, it switched the 5 to 6 now, and I'm actually just moving along. Card forms is really, if you have clean code that has not been copy-pasted or anything like that one, card forms is really the only thing that is a challenge with the existing code. Reports, layouts has the same issue, because it's basically because of the fixed positioning. It gives you a huge issue merging the code. Tables are really easy. Code units are really easy. Validation code and things like that one is really easy to merge, actually. So, but there is these special functions, and I'll actually just use my function keys in here without even looking almost. And add 1 page again. See down here it now say 5. As I hit enter, it will now say in page number 6, so I move the controls. And I have a few more examples of this one, and then one more, and I think, oh, I thought I was done. Down here, by the way, you can see why I'm so sure on all this one being exactly what I want. Here's a little status on each of the compares. I can see I have 1 inserted groups, 0 deleted, 0 changed, 0 equal groups, and actually I have a total of 8 inserted lines down here. This one is actually my custom one, and it actually shows me the same information down here. So in this one I will have to change my in-page number. Let's say I by accident put in 4, by the way, and you can see right now it say in-page number 4. It now changed it to in-page number 8 in here. You can also go here and say, oops, that was a mistake. I actually want to change my in-page number, and I want to do -3, and then it changed it back to 5 for me in here. If you have a hard time figuring out what's going on, you can actually look at the changelog in here for each version. So if I can't figure out the context of this one, I can actually bring up the complete object, and this one is where I actually can see my changes in the complete sales return order form in here. But I'm done with that one. And I get my error that when it gets to the menu suite, it have an issue. This one is my first page in here, the customer card. And one of the real nice things about pages is there's no fixed positions any longer. It's not necessarily the best for the view of it, but for merging code, it's a perfect solution actually. So now I just have to decide which one to put first and last. I can see I have a group commission, and I have some, and I have a group EDI. So I'll just do this one, put them last. And put them last, it's my sales order, it's the next form. My posted sales invoice. And another one, just do it last. And I have one more, I think, and then I'm done here. And then it actually, I finished merging in here. And it took me almost 10 minutes while talking in here. But in real life, I could have probably have finished this one in a minute or two, actually, doing these ones. And this one is, yeah, it's built for an example that merges nicely, and I don't get any ugly conflicts. But it's actually not that uncommon to get merges like this one if you have one clean product and you're trying to put it into a messed up database. So as long as you have one clean version, it actually works pretty fine. And standard Microsoft code in general is pretty clean actually when you're moving from one version to another. I had one issue in here. I actually had several issues because I know I intentionally did something wrong about putting them on the wrong tab. I can actually go in here and say under print, I can find what is called overlapping controls in here. And I can go in and say I want to run it for this version, and I probably only want to run it for forms right now. And then it goes in and finds, oh, on my customer card I have an issue, and also on my sales order I actually have multiple fields here on top of each other. And you could either go figure out what you did wrong and remerge it, and let me go remerge my customer card, because that's the one where I intentionally did it wrong in here. So I can go in and say, I want to redo that one. So I basically just delete the customer card. And then I go back and, whoops, that was a little too much. And then I go back and just start the merge again because I messed up, and then it shows up the customer card again in here. And I'll do the function to add one, and I learned that I can just put those ones first, for example, and then I will go change my in-page number and add one to it, and then click OK. And then I get the error with the menu suite and blah, blah. I have already dealt with the menu suite, and the reason I can't merge it is because it's not in the worldwide product. So what I did here, I actually just went into the worldwide product, set new on menu suites, picked 58, and saved it. And that's all I have done in here. And the source code for that menu suite is actually in this text file in here. So let me go here and pretend that one used to be in my worldwide product in here. And I want to import to my worldwide product. And see, this one is where the lookup actually makes sense, because now it fills out the description, it fills out the Navision version, and everything correct for you down here. And the only thing I have to do is import my menu suite up here and click OK. So now it has imported that one, and I would see that I actually had that object in here. And now I can go back and say, OK, now merge. And this one now basically is like there's code inserted here, there's code inserted here. So it just deals with it like anything else. So I would just put the inserted lines first. And menu suites are kind of nasty because they're non-human readable. These numbers is like there's no way you can read this one because there's so many of these numbers that actually changes. It's kind of random. It's a GUID that is like an internal development thing. So, whoops. Oh yeah, that's remind me of something I forgot here, by the way. It's actually a code unit that runs, and the code unit pops up a question to you. How are you going to skip out of this process? Because when you hit escape, the code unit keeps on running. So if I wanted to stop merging, I could actually say exit merging down here. And it will actually remove some code away from it. I can also skip this individual object. But let's say here, I know I did it right, so I can actually accept changes. There also is an ability to insert something in what is called later merge. If something is so complex that you can't solve it right now, you just want to put it in a list and later on come back and figure out what to do with it. And that's what later merging lines actually is. You can export them basically like a log, just 3 different versions instead of 2 versions. But I will accept my changes, and now it's finished in here. So I'm ready here. I have something that is merged in here. So let's go here and actually export my version in here. And I'll just put it out here, and I'll put it in as this one is called merged. And there are several options in here, and I'll come back to some of them later on actually down here. It's exporting this one. But what I did here in the beginning, I actually went in and said, okay, first I take the customer's database. I delete all the ones that are equal. Also, if it's just date and time changes. Then I only imported the EDI that was actually identical to the objects. So now I have kind of an issue. I have only a portion of the EDI solution. So really I need to go to my object designer and import them from an FOB file first. And as I mentioned earlier, is to handle automation controls and all kinds of things like that one. You don't have the ability to compile necessarily, so you want to import a compiled object as much as possible. Since the Mergetool is actually inside this database, I can actually bring up my object designer. And I now want to go and import my EDI from the FOB file in here. And I have my 102 FOB file, and I say open in here. And there's some conflicts, and yeah, that's fine. And you can see some of the tables in here. There's new fields, and it's actually trying to merge the existing one. Right now, as you saw, it's field in the 51,000 range, and my license, of course, have permissions to create less one. But let's pretend it's a US add-on, and they added fields in the 14 million range. There's only one license in the world, except the Microsoft license, that can actually insert that one, and that's ISV's developer's license. So if I click OK down here, I want to merge those ones, because that's what I want to get in. And you get this one, you have specified an unknown variable. It's basically because there is validation code, and it adds the fields plus the validation code. That it should really only have added the fields, because that's what I need to have a hole in the security system to do for me. But it tried to do the validation code, and yeah, it's been like 1.0 actually has been like this one, so it's kind of an annoying thing. There's at least a way to solve that one, because what I can do in the Mergetool is actually export something that is called with strip fields. What is it? Export tables with strip fields. So I will say I'm on the EDI version. I want to export that object, and I want all the tables, and I want to strip all fields from validation code between the range 50,000 and 99,000. Nope, I don't want to overlay the file. So it already exported a text file, and before I can do anything, I would need to import that text file that I have here. So let me close this database and open up my EDI database. And I'll actually mess up the objects in here. So I'm going to do whoops. What's going on here? I'm going to do a copy of the database, and let me just call it. Whoops. And these objects, if I look at my customer table, for example, in here, my field is now in the 51,000 and my license actually allow it. But it could be a 14 million range field. It could be anything in here. And if I look at my sales header, for example, that is one of the ones that actually blew up on, I can actually go down and look at my field, and that's where I have my validation code. So if I have a EDI ship to code, I actually do different things down here. And these objects are in the database. I already have permission to them. So if I now import my text file, with the one with the strip fields, it actually, if I look at the uncompiled objects, I already had the field. I don't get a license problem with this one. If I look at the code now, the code is all gone. So these ones are actually the tables I want, and let me just filter here on EDI. And I now export these ones to, oops. So I now exported those ones to a special FOB file. And let me go back to my database again here then. So it's my Kronos International down here. One thing, by the way, I'm running this one with an DBMS cache that is actually bigger than my actual database. So as long as I read anything from the database, I don't ever go to disk any longer. So it's one thing that speeds up performance heavily when using the Mergetool to have as much cache as possible. So it works in a SQL database. Oh, let me wait with that one for a second. So now I can go in here and I can take my strip fields in here, and I can now select the merge option and click OK. And this one is basically the hole in the security system that now puts these ISV table number or field numbers into my, or it's not a hole, it's intended to be that way, but it basically allows me to add this one. I had to do a little extra, but it's one of those ones. You don't have to at least go in and manually delete the code in here. The other thing I need to do is basically go and say, okay, now go to the real ones. And I would say anything that I actually don't have existing object being modified, I can import these ones. But I can also go ahead and replace, because even if I replace every object, I go into import the few objects that were a conflict. I have merged those ones. So I actually import those ones on top of it. So what I can do in here, I can go ahead and say, yeah, that's fine. I replace all of them and just click OK in here. And now it replaced a bunch of things, and it created one object in here. And now to finish my merge, I need to take my text file. That was actually my original one I created down here. So this one was the first one I created from the Mergetool. I had my database with all my customizations in it. I imported all the EDI and stepped on top of my customizations. But the few objects I had conflicts with, I have actually dealt with those ones in the Mergetool, and I'm now importing that Mergetool, and I have a complete version in here. And I can go out here and filter on 0, and I should be able to compile everything if I did it right. And it basically compiles. So this one was, it was customer card, the sales header, all kinds of heavy modify or tough objects to actually deal with, and I put it all together using the merge tool here. So yeah, so that's basically the three-way merge, and there is challenges with this one. This one is a nice example. I have the same number of text layers and things like that one. But basically there's 6 steps in this. First of all, preparing the source code. And I already had that done in here. I exported the text files nicely. Then importing it. I did that one by selecting, comparing the different versions and deleting as much as I can. Do the initial automated merge, and then start dealing with the manual stuff. And if you look at time to get down to step number 4, it can be a huge customized database. It can be almost no changes. Keyboard time on that one is probably less than 15 minutes actually. Maybe the tool run for an hour, but you only spend 15 minutes actually doing it. And then manual merges is, of course, it's like, yeah, I did it in 20 minutes or 10 minutes while talking. You can actually work on it for 2-3 days, a week or something like that one, if it's really complex. But again, it's same process. You see a screen, and if you have better screen resolution, it really makes a lot more sense. So at the end, exporting objects, and then building the final database with the tricks I did about getting the field numbers created and things like that one. If I look at these ones in a little more details, for preparing source code, there's a few things that is really important. Always export with the ENU language selected. Don't try to export it with Danish or German or anything like that one, because the yes and no is actually going to be put in your local language. So always export with ENU language selected. Build a database with only objects. I was so happy when I imported these EDI objects and actually overlaid everything I had. I didn't have any data in my database. So what you normally would do, you create a brand new database. Even if you run on SQL, you'll probably create a native one because it performs a fair amount faster working with the merge tool in a native database. And then only import the objects, because you want to deal with the code first and then start dealing with the data conversions afterwards. And then a very, very important thing is actually export all versions from the same executable. And you should use the one that is the final one. If you ever looked in the text format between a 3.7 executable and a 2009, there's a lot of changes in there. Even if it's identical object, that actually is changes like the clustered on the first key, the field groups, and all kinds of things that add one. Same about reports, where it actually adds a bunch of things on reports and things like that one. So if you don't export with the same executable that you go into, you will have a lot of differences. And I have an example. The last thing is about removing languages. So you only have the ENU in there. A lot of times customer will have imported maybe a German text layer in the Danish version or something else in there. And if you don't do anything, there'll be huge differences. Let me switch back here and show an example of that one. And I actually have a merge tool prepared here with some more information in it. This one, by the way, is a 10 gigabyte file. It's not uncommon to end up with merge tools like that one. So it's huge when it starts importing 3 million lines of source code per version. So I have a US version down here, and merge tool up here. I'll actually look at versions. This one is a real-life example, actually. In US, Microsoft released first a version only containing ENU language. 2 months later, when most customers went live with this version, they actually released one that had English Canadian and French Canadian in it. More object changes. And then 3 months later, they released one that also included Spanish Mexico in it. So there's basically 3 different versions. And most customers were sitting and waiting for 5.0 Service Pack 1. That was a really good version. So a lot of people went live on the one without text layers in it. Let me just go down here and actually look at what that actually looks like. So I have a 2009 Service Pack 1 down here, and I have compared. Where's my? Oh, I have contrast. I was just thinking that I didn't have anything. I was looking at these counters down here, and I looked at the wrong place. In here, you can actually see the payment terms table. Quite a small table. If I had used the first W1 version here, and I would have looked at actually having 39% of the whole object changed a huge number of change groups and all kinds of things like that. And it would be a really, really nasty merge. Same as I get more, now I'm only missing the Spanish text layer, but still a lot more. And then I have this one down here. The other thing, it actually show up 4.4% change. I went ahead and deleted my E and U, both in Service Pack 1 and in this one. And if I look at my contrast, it's even smaller now. So even if I have changes in the English Canadian, French Canadian, and Spanish one deleted out of here, I even got a smaller log, even if my objects are actually also physically smaller, or not physical, but fewer lines of code. My percentage should actually grow, but it even shrunk compared to the other one. What it is Microsoft actually changed the translations between 5.0 Service Pack 1 and 6.0 in the French version and in the Spanish-Mexican one. So simply by pulling those ones out that have nothing to do with your merge, you can actually go and do that one. The way to pull them out, by the way, is you can actually go in here and with 2009 R2, there is, when you now do this one called a language module, when you export, you can actually say delete language down here, and it will not modify the date and time and modify flag any longer. It used to do that one. 2009 R2 actually now makes this function actually work. So you can delete all languages, create the language module. When you're done, you basically import them again, and you have everything working nicely. So this one is the last thing, and that's typically, it's like it can make like a merge taking a day, or it can take a week in the difference of this one. And pulling the language layers out is probably a 10-minute task. So yeah, that's important for anything except worldwide. This one is a really important thing to actually pull out the Danish text layer, the German text layer, and you can always reapply it. It matches it up exactly where it came from. Same for customization and everything you have. So importing the source code, and as you saw, I imported the old one, compared my custom against it, deleting all the equals, found the one that only had object properties, and then at the end, I went and imported my new version, but only the few objects I actually have to deal with. Merging 6,000 objects just in processing time is probably 2 hours. Merging the few objects actually were changed in processing time is maybe 5 minutes or 2 minutes or something like that one. It's just keyboard time that takes all the delay of getting it done. Initial merge, you select the versions, and after you've done this one, you have really not put any time into it, and you can now estimate how much it will actually take based on mainly the groups and things like that one, and how many objects are left in there. It also will say if you actually imported the wrong version, you see a huge amount of code actually still being in there. And you can use the report as I showed it in here. Then there's the manual merges, and you can say that skip, and there's a little overview down in the bottom. And I used hotkeys, and you can see it's really fast if you know them. It's one of those things when you spend 8 hours in front of that screen, those ones are pretty much figured into your fingers, and you can move everything around. You can turn the mouse upside down. There's no use for it when actually doing merging. So, yeah, there is specific functions for specific cases and things like that one. So, and if it's totally impossible, you can insert them in manual merge. But I actually prefer to just copy the lines into Excel and then write a little comment of why I can't merge it actually. And then I deal with it inside the environment when I get in there. If you want to find exactly that line of code where the problem is, I sometimes put in 3 X's, for example. The import of the objects will work fine, but it won't compile because there's no variable called 3 X's in there, and you can find exactly that line of code where you need to go do something for these manual stuff in here. Exporting. As I actually merging, I didn't look at that one, but my date and time in the objects. Let me open up this database here again. Under versions. My output in here, if I actually look at this object in here, I'll see my date and time is actually yesterday. If I looked in the database, I would see it actually is today. And my modify flag, my version list is wrong in here. What there is actually something that is called new object properties. And this one is actually, during the export, it will actually go in and substitute these things in here. So until you export and compile, you actually don't have the completed object. So this output is it's like kind of temporary, but almost done. So you need to go do the last step of actually exporting them in here. And then you can use this trick to get around permission issues for fields actually to export these special stripped fields in here. The final database, if you're doing an upgrade from a customer, you start with the NAV database that actually has all the fields, all the objects in it that come from Microsoft, so you don't have to deal with permission issues for field numbers. And then you can import the different versions into it after you do that one. The merged objects is from the text file, and right now I didn't do any mistakes, but you would expect to have a few things. The Navision is real picky about the curly brackets. If you have one more in one direction than the other direction, it will blow up during the import, and you have to go fix that in the text file. You can also, if you messed up, delete the object and redo it, as I did with the customer card form in here. And then you import and compile, and then you have all the issues to fix inside C-side, but you're basically done with it. And now is the time to start dealing with the data, because now you actually have the code that you need in here. So, yeah. So what can make it easy? Always minimize the number of objects. It's simply a time issue. Export with the same executable, removing the languages, importing, and then run basically skip if manual merge first, and then go check at that one. And if you have a really messed up customer database, you can actually still implement a clean ISV solution or a upgrade to Navision to it, because as long as one of your two versions is decently cleaned, it's actually kind of easy. The one thing that can really make it tough is if you actually did a copy-paste on buttons. That's the worst thing you can actually do, is copy-paste of buttons, because basically all control IDs is changing to your license control ID. And copy-paste of fields is do exactly the same. Physically, it looked the same, but the Mergetool will say, nope, the fixed ID is totally different. It's different code, actually. So don't ever copy-paste, and I know it's kind of a big issue, and that's mainly the reason for using Excel or later merge lines. It's when the code is not where it's supposed to be at all, so you can't implement it in there. And RDL is another issue. It's like Mergetool actually can deal with RDL, but if anyone ever opened the RDL without the hotfix for whatever it was at the report writer thing, it will, the first time you save it, completely scramble the order of all the controls, and you basically cannot do anything with RDL. RDL is another tough issue, because we used to have a report that have 3,000 lines, it now has 30,000 lines, and 27,000 of them is actually RDL code. And if you look at it, it's 90% default values that is all over the place. So instead of putting the differences in, they actually put everything in the RDL code in there. So report layout can also be real complex. It didn't take much, just move all the fields down one column, and every fixed position is different, and that will basically be destroying everything. So, and then the 10 menu suites, but I showed you this trick about how actually to create the empty one, and then you can actually merge them after that one. And if you have future upgrades for an ISV solution, by the way, and you already done this trick, those ones will actually slide in quite easily on top of that one again. So, okay, something totally different. And I think I'm doing pretty decent on time, so I'll get through a lot of these features in here. Let me go here and export my finalized version in here. And I have two things I know about this one. I have all my modified flags set, and I know I had some objects that actually had EDI in the version list with capital letters. So, and you can see there's a few of them that actually was not touched by the other ones. So I'm using the marking here to basically say or, and do this one, and then I'll go ahead and say want to export all the marked only. I could export everything. It would just take a very long time for me here, so I wouldn't be able to actually finish this one. But let's say this one is my customer, and it's EDI, and I will export a FOB and a text file. Oops. This one, the best thing about Windows 7, by the way, it changes the extension in Navision by itself. Oh, Vista did it too, but I used to run XP. So I have my exported objects, and I can basically now go and say I want to have my customer EDI, And I exported it the wrong place. Did I export it in EDI? Oh, no, it's down here. Okay, I exported it here, yeah. And then based on, and I want to see all my changes, so I will compare, and I want to export my log automatically. And it now goes through 3-4 steps, actually. There actually also is what is called a batch interface, where you basically, if you're going to import all the versions coming from Microsoft and you have all the text files, you have to come back every 15 minutes to put a little more information in here and then wait 15 minutes. You can actually set up a batch process that basically will import all of them one at a time, and you can do most of the operations that are in here, even creating source code analysis and things like that one can actually be run from the batch processor. But basically, I'm done here. I have my customer EDI, I already created the contrast, I have everything in here. If I look at this one, I can see I have an issue down here. I don't have captions. To be able to do translation, I need captions. So that's kind of an issue. If I go down here, look at code unit 80, I can see I have some commission and I have a test field that works fine. Down here I have, oh darn, a fixed text in the middle of the source code. I need to figure out how to solve that one. So let me go here and use something under advanced that is actually about ENU captions. So I go in here and say I want to create an export with language. And I basically want to recreate text constant. This one is actually a machine that will read through all the source code. It will find all texts that are in there, put them in a list, and then you can confirm the list. The same engine basically runs when I'm done and exporting the objects. It will actually, this checkmark is the one if it actually builds it or if it writes the file. So now I want to build it. And these numbers down here is the ranges I actually want to add because I don't want to fix Microsoft's problem. I only fix my own problems. And that's why I can add these numbers down here. And it goes through and find all the text in here. And then I can go down and say, okay, let's look at my ENU caption, my text that I found in here. And I can see I have something payment discount. That's an awkward one. What is that one? I can go out here and look. It's in the objects 18 customer, line number so-and-so. I just look up and say, it's a calculation formula. It's actually because this filter contains something that has parentheses and things that Navision by default adds the quotes around it. And this tool just finds things with quotes around it and put it in here. So I don't want to export that one. So I can go out here and set I do not want to use it. So I basically hit F9. So I do that one. And I have a few more of the same case down here. But then I have something that clearly looks like a text constant. I can see out here it's in my object, so I probably need to fix those ones. And then I have code unit 80 down here. Let me go take a look at what is that. And that's exactly my error I actually want to fix in here. So I now determine which one I actually want to do captions for, or text constants. Captions is a given. You need a ENU caption. So we will actually use the field name and build an ENU caption for that one, or the object name. So let me go here and now run that function to export it. Uncheck the field and give it a new file name out here. I'll just call it number 2. And then now one thing that is important is this one new base variable number down here, because I'm going to add a new variable in code unit 80. And what should be the text number? Because this one is basically, if I had an add-on in the 14 million range, I'd probably use a 14 million range number. But I want to use 50,001 in here. And it now goes through, it export a new one, and it actually pulls out all the codes that was in quotes that I confirmed, add all the captions, and builds the objects in here. So let me go here and say, I will go and say, I want to see the differences. And I have my EDI2 out here. And I want to go ahead and compare against my version, delete all equal, and export the log. And it now goes through and it imports the objects and it compared what I started out with. And you see several of these objects actually had no changes. Because if I didn't add fields on a form or menu items, or actually if I don't add something, I don't have anything. So 63 of those objects were unchanged. And I can go look at the log, or I can go in here and see what were the changes. And let's go look at the code unit 80, because that's the most interesting one. It basically say now it's text 50,001. And as I come down here in the global variables, it added the text 50,001 with the text in here. So it actually did everything for me, all the programming. And if I look at a table like customer, for example, oops, I can see that it went ahead and did caption. Again, this one is kind of, it's like, yeah, there's curly or square brackets, there's all kinds of things around it, but this one needs to be imported and compiled, and then I have everything I need. So I'll go here and export this version, just call it number 3, and then go down here and run that export. So, and now I can go, since I'm working in the same database where the tool actually is, I can go here and import my number 3, 1.1 megabyte compared to 2.5 megabyte. Find the one that are uncompiled. Compile those ones. And now I actually have captions and everything in here in my solution in here. So that's all that it requires to actually do this one. No endless searching for fields that are not in there and things like that one. It's all inside the Mergetool. So, yeah. If you want to do other languages, by the way, this one only do the ENU, but when you have ENU, you can actually use the translation tool. And if I get time here, I'll actually get to it. So one thing I want to do is actually online help, because that's another really tough thing. It's suggested that you use a product called RoboHelp, $500 a seat, just to build it. You basically have to maintain humongous HTML files and thousands of them. And I would say it's close to impossible to get it nice and consistent. This tool will actually use what you have inside the Mergetool to do it. And let me just go here and say I want to create online help now. And I want to create a new help version, and oh darn, it's not set up yet. And I will have to just go in and create this record. It will use Word as an editor, and it needs to know where Word is, but it actually goes out here automatically. And I have a 64-bit Word. So it actually is in that folder. I went out and searched it for it. Another thing, it needs a help compiler, and it's actually default in Windows 7, but you have to try and install the old one before it actually adds a new one. So there's a way to do all this one. So I just did the setup, and I can now go in and say online help. And this one should be my, I don't know, my customer, for example. And then I will go look at objects, and what is the current version, and I'll just use this objects in here because that's everything I have. And then my object range, my objects is in the 50,000 range. And my fields is actually in the same range. The reason this one is important is because when it's searched through the source code, you don't want to generate help for Microsoft fields or for something else actually. So I can go in here and say, yeah, and this one I want to do the ENU one. And then you use a function down here and say, okay, get the help tokens from the objects. And a message would have been nice, but I don't have one. It basically created all these information down here. So you can see in table 13, I have field number 50,021, and so on. If I wanted to go and write online help for this one, I can bring up my editor, edit, and it will ask me for if I really want to open up Word. And then you go down here and you just start writing your help. So this one is the help. And then you basically close Word again. What it did was actually that if I go to the card here, it imported my help into the database in here. And there's all kinds of things you can do with references. So I can see down here that I actually have several fields that are shipment description, and it repeats in another table and things like that one. Let's just go here and filter and say I want to see everything that actually is something with shipment descriptions. And I'll go in here and say, yep, that's all the one that have the shipment description. I basically want to set a reference to another object, or set a reference in here. And I will have to remove this one a little here. And I want to pick my customer table. And if I look at what happened out here, it's basically now saying the online help for this field is the same as the online help for this one. So I don't have to read all these posted tables. I don't have to write the same online help again and again and again. I just basically maintain it on my customer table, and then it goes everywhere else. So if I go here and write a reference in here, this is another help. And I can actually put a reference in here if I wanted to. If I wanted to reference my customer or this field in here, I can actually go in here and see table 18 or T underscore, and then I want to reference my field number, 50,011 for example, and then do this one. So when I now save that file, if I look at it in here, I actually now put in a %1 and then the table number. And if you didn't know the field number, you can of course go in here and do the lookup and think that one. So you can make as many references you want. So let's say I'm done with this help here. So let me go export this stuff here. So I actually now want to go down here and export my online help. As I mentioned, it's a huge amount of XML files, or no, HTML file. So I need a folder to do it in. So let me go here and create a new folder. And the other thing is a help file. And if I just put something in here, there is 10 help files that is actually, it's like the menu suite, by the way. Microsoft have pre-compiled 10 help files into your into their help files. So if you call it add-in underscore A to add-in underscore GA, it actually will work. But let's call mine add-in underscore A. And then I'll actually use this one. And then I'll go ahead and export my HTML and other files in here. And okay. And that's an unsecure operation. And now it actually calls the help compiler. And my help is now created. So if I look at it in here, I have something called source. And there's all kinds of files with add-in A. But basically there's an HTML file created for each of the individual fields down here. And I don't know, was it a shipment description I put help in? No, that was number 2. Oops, that was not good. But in here you can see shipment descriptions and things like that one. That one is my help and things like that one. I can also go look at the compiled one. And this one is my list. And when you embed this one in the normal help, you can now see this one as part of standard Microsoft help actually. Let me show you a few more features that is actually available in the online help. Because one thing that would be really nice was actually for your batch jobs, for example, to go and actually write online help. And you can do this one. The reports, individual forms are actually also in here. So if you have a form that is very special, you can go and write online help for that also. But in here, I can go for my report also. Another thing that would be nice is actually having pictures in here. And let me open up my editor. And I'll go here and if I right-click on this one and copy my image URL up here, I can actually put this image in my help file. So normally the source code for this in HTML is something like this one. But if you write HTML inside Word, it immediately tries to help you. So you have to cheat it and use the square brackets like this one instead in here. So I put my image in and my source is equal to this one, and then my end curly bracket in here. So even that one, it actually goes in and say, hey, I can help you with this also, but it's fine that change you did in here. If everything gets completely messed up, I can always go in here and actually make the changes and see, removed my double quotes in here, so I'll just put them in here. Not that it makes a difference, but there was no spaces in this one. So if I now go compile my online help again, and I open up my online help, I now have my picture in here. So you can have everything you want in here. The last thing that is in here is actually an ability to do what is called FAQs. And you can do, this one is one about installing, for example. And you can go out and say you actually want to include FAQs in your online help. So when you include this one, it will be in there. You also include it in the online help index. And then let's bring up again, it's Word. And the answer is, just do it. And if I now go and export my HTML and other files, did I forgot to close that one? The editor, by the way, it locks them. Include FAQs in online help. That will probably help. So now I have my FAQ that I forgot to give a name, by the way, but you have your procedure descriptions included in here also. So yeah, let's go back here. One thing I haven't shown, you can actually track usage. So you can actually go in and set up a little bitmap on each one, and they will actually be uniquely named. So you can see, and you put them on your website, and then you use your web server log to actually track how many actually reach your online help. And with all the challenges of getting it in, it's actually quite amazing how many users actually use it. I used to work as development manager at Lanham Associates, and we did online help. And I said, yeah, if we have 10 hits on online help a day, that would actually be good. But we actually had, on many of the individual menu items, we had more than 1 hit a day actually. And with all the challenge of getting help in, it's kind of a big issue. So renumbering tool is a whole other thing that is in here. And yeah, let me see what else is in here. Maybe I should leave a little room for questions. Translation tool is in there. Yeah, I hope it has a future. I know I've talked with Lars about the dev base, and right now it's actually running in the classic client. Let me show you something in here. This one is now a role center. It has all the versions. I can go in here. I can import an object text file. And let's just call this one X, for example. And I can set up all the same options. Click OK. And, yeah, I know. I'll switch something around here. Oh. And is now importing. So, of course, the GUI in this one has kind of an issue with having 4 subforms set up the right way. It actually shows up a list underneath, but a lot of the function actually works in the Mergetool already from inside the router environment. So the other thing that is in here, I can actually, now it's comparing and everything for me here automatically. But that's basically, it's like it works in the router client also. One of the new things that will actually be in here is the voice and partner source integration. So you can do directly integration. If you're an ISV and you maintain authorized resellers, you maintain your modules inside voice, you download your transactions of who buys your software, it's actually will have a direct integration to partner source for importing and exporting those files you need in there. The other thing, if you go to the form transformation tomorrow, you see that at the end of it, I'll actually switch to using the form or the transformation tool built in directly in the Mergetool. It will use the source code analyzer, it will use intelligent lookups, all directly from inside the transformation tool that Microsoft actually released. So if you want something else, give me an idea, and potentially we'll make it at one point. So yeah. 5 minutes for questions, I think. If nobody has any questions, let me show some more. Okay.
There are some questions. I'm going to go over there.
Didn't think I'd let you get away without any questions, did you? I was curious about the manual merge part of the process, which obviously is the bigger complex part. It seems what's happening, the whole thing's running in the code unit. So when you've got questions hitting, you set about putting them aside later. Is there a way to sort of group them all together, get a list of everything so that you can run it all, put it aside, and then come back and group them? I'm thinking more in terms of where you're finding things you're trying to merge, and then you say, well, that's in the new functionality. I want to remove that or change that. And it's actually going to relate to another 3 tables and 4 code units and 8 forms. So you'd like to get some sort of a note where you could say, mark this, and I want to handle all of those in one batch together. Is there a way to easily do that?
No, the merge tool deals with the text and one object at a time. It don't really deal with packages. I know IDIN has a real neat solution for it actually, but it didn't change the process of the actual merge, because this one is just about getting a database with no data and getting the objects ready. And then I think IDIN's solution can actually go in and compare them even binary. So you basically have like, what did the customer have out in their database? And with IDIN's application, you basically go in and say, I want this database, all changes to be sent to them. And it basically go in and create exactly a package that is, this one is what, because I went in and filtered on anything that were modified, anything that had EDI in it. And yeah, that works fine because it's simple, but in real life it's kind of tough. And the only thing you can go by is date, but you actually exported objects from FOB. So again, it's really not easy to go by date either. So no, there's no feature like that one to actually build kind of a package.
No, I meant more of a manual flag where you mark them yourself and say, I want to handle these in a batch. Not automated, where I'd mark them all and then I could come back and fill them.
Yeah, you can actually do that one. Let's say when I did this merge in here, and let's just do it to, let's just restart this one down here. Just do a number 2 and run it. Let's say I couldn't figure out how to deal with this one. I hit escape here, and then I can insert them later merge lines. But I could also say, right now, I don't want to deal with this object because it's completely messed up. I'm going to do it inside C-side instead. So you can actually just say, yeah, skip this object, and then it just keeps on going to the next one. So that's another way in the manual merge screen to say, I don't want to know how to deal with this, but you can basically just skip it. So is that more kind of like the things?
No, more like maybe an option which says, a text where I can mark it and say, flag this, instead of XXX, I want this one to be XYZ and this one to be, put a code so that when I go into C-side, I know a list of the objects that I need to handle at a time.
Oh, let me go back and actually show you what I meant here by the Excel. So let me restart this one. The first change is the only real change actually in here. So the rest of it is more like property style changes. So I go in here and I come to this one, and yeah, I'm going to put in standard. It really sucks you can't disable that menu when you actually start it. So now I'm in here, and I need to put this one in here and say, I don't know how to deal with this one, but I can go in here and basically create an empty line, and I have to do a bunch of errors in here. Oops, I did a mistake in here. One thing you do by exit merging, it has to commit actually before it opens this screen. If you noticed, I actually fumble fingered on that one. So this one is actually XXX1, for example. And I actually take all these changes here, open up Excel, and say XXX1. That's, whoops, that was a marketing event here. I basically just put these lines of code in here and say, when you come to XXX1 that won't compile, this one is the code you actually have to deal with. And then you just keep on going in here. And you saw I put in a bunch of indentation. When you import and you have too little indentation in code, it will blow up. So that's one of the reasons. So in this way, I can't do anything. If I try to put a comment in here, it will blow up immediately. So, but it would be real nice if actually in a future version, if I say insert in later merging tables, it would actually ask for kind of a comment and say, why did I put it in here?
Yeah,
that actually would be attached.
Exactly what I was asking for.
Yeah, yeah. It will probably be here very soon. So. Yeah.
There's one more question over there. Let's see.
Regarding the indentation, for example, if I need add some additional code, how about indentation? Because you know, this is no fixed size font here.
No, one thing you actually can do in here, right now it looks, especially with my low resolution, it's really tough to deal with, but let me show you an option in here in the setup actually. There is something here that is called compress spaces, and I compress them in blocks of 10, so I still keep the kind of normal indentation in here. If I now start the merge, and let's just make another version down here. So see now, instead of having this tremendous amount of spaces, I actually just saying that, hey, there's 70 spaces around here, and I can still do some indentation in here, but it will actually still keep it 7, so it compresses it in blocks of 10, so it makes it easy for you to insert it. It's kind of like, okay, now I'm inserting a line in here. Now I have to go and say, okay, there's 70 spaces in here, and then I want my XXX1, for example, in here. So there's a way to deal with it. The tool don't consider indentation anything different than a totally different line. Because basically it's like, there's probably, if there's indentation differences, if you hit the right end, begin, think of that one, it's actually quite tough sometimes to figure out. So I know the developer's toolkit was trying to be intelligent about it, but the merge tool is just consider everything a change, and you have to deal with it manually. So it don't try to do anything with indentations. So I consider adding a function that I actually can select some lines and then say indent 2, indent 4, indent a number, then you then put the number in actually, and that would be it. So, or tab and shift tab. So, okay.
I'll propose one more question before then we take the break.
About the form transformation tomorrow, will you use the merge tool in that lecture as well?
No, I will use 2/3 of it. I will actually use form transformation from Microsoft, the default one that actually is. At the end, I will show how actually is different. The only difference is the XML files you create from Microsoft modules is the exact same XML file you create from this one. It just have different lookup, and the application has been, I don't know, I called it cleaned up, but it's like anything that refers to the objects is on an object button, and you have a caption button, so you really don't have to look at captions. You have functions, and you basically have a export and run, so you basically don't have to remember these 6 steps in a row and select all records and all kinds of things like that one. It basically do everything for you here.
So that what you're going to show is another transformation tool, or is it just?
Yeah, but 2/3 of the session will actually use a standard tool for Microsoft.
Okay.
So it's showing it's just a different application. That's the only difference. All the things you would do is exactly the same. So
okay.
There's more tools in here to actually deal with something. There's promoted actions and field importance. You need to do this one consistently, and you actually read the source code and build it all in here. You can also import the XML files in here in a version, and then you can actually compare XML versions from one transformation tool to what is your current one and things like that one. So you store all that one as text files in here. There's a huge amount of abilities of the merge tool, and I only scratch the surface on a lot of them here. So, yeah. If I can make one little advertising thing. So the merge tool is for free. There is the documentation. There is. If you want actual training, mergetool.com do it. There's many people that know a lot about it, that is capable of doing training too. But it's actually paid training also for partners. So, yeah. Yeah, and as you can see, I prefer you download from Mebuso because I really want to have more downloads than Developers Toolkit, and I'm close. So. Yeah. Yeah, there's FAQs and all kinds of things. So there's potentially going to be a forum in the future for Mergetool users only. It's not in any way going to compete with Mebuso. any question that goes outside the merge tool will immediately be deleted from it. But it's potentially something that will be in the future on mergetool.com, actually, a forum only for the merge tool. So, yeah. And I think, thank you for all your time.